Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to show you a bunch of CLI tools that you can use for text processing. All these tools are Unix-based and comes pre-installed on your system. So the first tool we're going to look into is called sed, which is a tool that you can use to transform text inside of files. Things like replacing text, deleting lines, inserting lines, and many more. To start, let's look at this example. Here we have a simple text file called sed.txt. As a first example, let's say we want to replace the word world with universe. Now, this word appears 2 times when you start this text and at the end of the file. So we want to replace both. To do so, we can run the command sed search word or world and replace it with universe, and let's do a global search essentially. This says that every occurrence of the word world has to be replaced with universe. Then you pass in the name of the file, which is sed.txt. When you run this command, notice that it does replace both words. Another example, let's say we want to remove the third line inside of this text, which is this line. I want to remove this line using this sed command. To do so, you can do sed 3d and then pass in the name of the file. 3d essentially tells the system or tells the CLI tool that I want to remove the third line. When you press enter and run the command, notice that it's been removed. So we used to have this line here, and now it doesn't exist. Great. Another example is, let's say I want to insert a line, and maybe on the third line. We can do something like sed 2a, and let's say I want to insert this line, and then we pass in the name of the file. When you run the command, you see it's been inserted here. One more example, let's say we want to print only the lines that contains the word sed, which is, in our case, it's this 4th line. To do so, what we can do is sed-n, and then essentially for every occurrence of this word sed, we want to print it out. And when we press enter and run the command, notice that the only line that is printed out is the one that has the word sed. And let's do this last example where we want to replace the word brown with red, but only for the lines that has the word quick. To run this command, we can do sed quick, and I want to search for the word brown and replace it with red. And then we pass in obviously the name of the file. If I run this command, notice what happens. So this is the line that has the word quick. I just replaced the word brown with red. Next we have awk or AWK, and this is a powerful tool that you can use for data extractions and reporting. Note that this is not just a CLI tool, it's actually a programming language, so it can be used for more complicated things. Here's an example of how you can use it. Here we have a simple text file with a comma-separated values. As a first example, let's say we want to print out the first and the third field, which is the name and the occupation in this case, for each line. We can do something like awk-f and then pass in a comma. What this is saying is use comma as field separator and then print out the first value and the third value from this file. So the first value would be the name and the third value would be the actual occupation. So if we run this command, we're supposed to see the name and let's say engineer, or the name and designer, like so. Another way you can use this, running the following command. Let me just copy paste that because it's long. Here, what we're trying to say is we want to calculate the average age for all these people. And so again, we want the comma to be the separator. First, we want to sum all the second values in the second columns, essentially, like the numbers, the age, and then we want to count all of them, all the different rows, and then we want to print the average. And so that's how we do it. We just do sum over count as well. And this should give us 32. So when you sum all these numbers and then divide them by the count, you should get the average age. So this command does so for us. Here's another one. Let's say you want to print out the name of the people who are older than 30 years old. So in this case, we're supposed to print this one and this one. And so if you run this command, which again, comma is a separator, we want to grab the second value, which is the age in this case, and only with the condition that it's greater than 30. And then we want to print it out. Run this command and notice we got the correct ones, which are this one and this guy. Here's another fun example. Let's say you want to add some like text or like make it a bit formatted. So if you run the following command, you can say printf and then add the word name, and essentially add the different fields with their kind of key value pair, essentially. If you run this command, notice we have name, age, occupation. And here's another example. Let's say you want to count the number of entries for each occupation. So essentially we have engineer, designer, manager, developer, and intern. In this case, we're going to get 1 for all of them. If we run the following command, notice that each one has a single occurrence, essentially. And to kind of figure out what we're doing here, we're using the comma to separate things. we have a counter. We're counting essentially how many of these occupations we have. And then we have a loop. And then we print out the result as the count. So here we have one for all of these things because we only have one. Next, we have Grep, which is a tool that you can use to search text. It's perfect to find specific patterns inside files. So here we have this simple text file, which kind of simulate a log file. We have some date, we have the log level, and essentially the log message. So to start, let's try to grep or search for every line that has the word error. To do so, you can do grep and then error and then pass in the file name. When you run this command, notice that we only print out the lines that have the word errors. Now, if you want this to be case insensitive, you can pass in the flag-i. So you can do like grep-i like so. And let's say you pass an error. If you print this out or run this command, notice it prints the same thing because it's case insensitive. Another example is, let's say you want to kind of print out all the lines that does not contain the word error. It's like the opposite. You can do something like grep-v and you pass an error and grep. Notice here, this prints out everything essentially, but you have to kind of pass in I in this case to kind of make it case insensitive, because if you don't, it won't find anything. It will print out all the lines. So passing I, notice it filters out all the lines that has the word error inside of it. You can also do something like count the lines that has, let's say, a certain word. To do so, you can do grep-c. And let's say we want to count all the lines that has the word user inside of it and give us 4. So a very useful example here, like let's say you have a log file and you need to count all the lines that has the word error. And this will give you like, for example, that. So in this case, let's say we have the word error and we want to make it case insensitive. So we put -i here and it gives you 2. So if you have a log file and a lot of errors, you need to know like how many errors did we even get there. That would be one way to do it. Another good example is, let's say you want to search for like 2 things instead of 1. You can do something like grep-e, and then let's say you want to search for all the lines that has the word error and warning. Running this command, you see that that gives you the lines that has these 2 words. I can see myself obviously using this for like log files most of the time. This is really my main usage for this. The next tool we're going to look into is called cut, which is a tool that you can use to cut out sections of each line of a file. So here we have a CSV file, which is a comma separated values. And so if you run the following command, here we're saying that use comma as the separator and then essentially grab the first field or the first value. So when we run this command, notice that it prints out the names. That's the F1 essentially. Another example is, let's say I want to extract and print out the first and the third field, the name and the occupation in this case. Another example that we can use is, let's say you want to print out the first and the third field, which is the name and then the occupation. We can run the following command. Again, we want the comma to be the separator, and then we want the first and the third field from this file. All right, so the next tool is sort, which is a tool that you can use to sort text. So here we have this sort.txt file, and let's say you want to sort it alphabetically. You can run sort and then pass in the file name. This will print out kind of all the text that you have sorted alphabetically. If you want to do the reverse order, you can just pass the flag-r. It gives you the opposite of it. If you want to do, let's say, numerical sorting, here's another file that we have that we can sort on. You can say sort and then pass in the name of the file. This won't sort it just yet because you have to pass in the flag-n, and this will essentially sort it numerically. If you want to do the opposite, do the -r, and that gives you the opposite of it. And so if you want to sort like a CSV file, you can run the following command. And this essentially is saying, I want to use comma as a delimiter, and then I want to use the second kind of key as the thing I'm sorting with, which in this case is the age. So if you run this command, notice that it sorts it by age. Another thing you can do is, let's say you want to output the result into a separate file. You can do something like sort and then pass in the name of the file, which is CSV here, -o for output, and then pass in the name of the new file you want to output this thing into. And there you have it. So we have this sorted CSV that is essentially the sorted list. This, in this case, is not really sorting them because we haven't passed the same like before. So if we go back a little bit to this guy here, we can do -o and let's say new sorted CSV, and that should give us the correct one. This one is sorted by age. Great. Next tool is called Uniq, which is written like this. Now, this tool can be used to do things like removing duplicate lines from, let's say, a sorted file. It's important that we sort the files before we use Uniq because Uniq only removes consecutive duplicate lines. So sorting is necessary here. To try it out, we can do something like sort unique.txt, which is the name of our file, and then we pipe it into unique-u, and then when we run the command, we get the word grape, because grape here is the only word that doesn't have a duplicate, essentially. Here's another one we can do here, sort unique.txt, and then we pipe it into unique, and then if we pass in, let's say, -c, this gives us a count for all the occurrences of like these different words. So apple appears 3 times, banana 2 times, grape 1, orange 2. So you can count them, essentially, how many of these occurrences we have. If you want to only show the duplicates, we can do something like this, but instead of -c, we can do -d. This only shows the words that have duplicates. And if you want to do the unique ones, -u, which is the first one we've tried here. All right, so the next tool is called tr. And this tool can be used to do some translating or deleting characters. And the best way to show you how this works is obviously with an example. So here we have a text file called tr.txt with some text inside of it and some numbers. If we run the following command, what we're trying to do is we're going to replace all A to Z kind of characters, and we want to capitalize them. So if you run this command, notice that everything is capitalized. Great. So this is the kind of things you can do with tr. Let's say you want to replace all spaces with underscore. We can do something like this, do space, and then replace it with underscore. So the way this syntax works is do tr, you put the first thing that you want to replace, essentially, and then what you want to replace it with, and then you pass in the file name. And if you run this command, notice that all the spaces have been replaced with underscore. Next, let's say we want to delete all the digits from a file. We can do something like tr-d and then pass in 0 to 9, and then pass in the name of the file. So we can do tr.txt. Notice that this line is now removed because it has some kind of numbers in it. So let's say you want to add more numbers here and you want to run the same command, still going to remove it. Another thing you can do is, let's say you want to remove essentially the \n from a certain file. You can do something like -d for removing, and then you pass in \n and then the name of the file. And then notice that this whole thing becomes a single line. Next up, we have a tool called WC, and this one is used to count lines, words, and characters inside of a file. So here we have the same file, essentially. If we pass in WC dash, let's just WC and the actual file, this gives us the count, essentially. And as I said, the first one would be the lines, and then words, and then characters. So we have 94 characters. If we pass in WC dash L, and then we pass in the name of the file, this essentially will give you the number of lines. If you want the words, you can do -W. And if you want the number of characters, you can do -M. You can even do like -C, which will give you the number of bytes. And in this case, it's kind of the characters, same thing. You can do this on multiple files, actually. So if you do like WC and then pass in WC.txt, and let's pass in tr.txt, which is the previous file, this essentially gives you all the things, all the kind of statistics for all these files. You can even use it with like piped input. Let's say you have echo hello world, and then you just pipe it into WC, press enter, it tells you that you have 2 words. All these tools can be piped into each other, by the way. Like, there's so many ways you can use them together, so this is just one of those examples. Okay, so the next set of tools is head and tail. Now, these tools can be used to display like the first or last few lines in a file. The way you can use them, if you do head and then put the name of the file, this is just going to print out everything. This will print out the first 10 lines because by default, it will always print out 10 lines. If you want to specify how many lines, you can do -n for like number of lines. So this gives you the first 5 lines. And if you do the opposite, let's say tail, and then do -n5, you pass in the name of the file. This do like the exact opposite, so it gives you like the kind of last 5 lines. Now you can do something like tail-f head tail.txt, and what this does is it essentially like continuously displays any new lines you get in this text. You can use this to like monitor a certain log file, for example. So if you run this, notice that it's still running. So if I go here and let's say I'm gonna duplicate this line and change 2 to 3 here, notice that it just prints out that line for us. It's continuously monitoring a certain file. This is very useful if you're on a server and trying to kind of in real time see some logs. And finally, for the last 2 tools I'm going to show you is we have diff and we have patch. Now, diff is used to compare 2 files line by line and just gives you an output of the difference. Patch can be used to kind of apply the changes from one file to the other. So here we have two files. We have this file 1 and file 2. And notice that the only difference is just we have like this line is kind of new here. Okay, there's one line difference. If we do something like diff file 1, we need to actually go into this diff thing here, and then we do diff file 1, file 2. This should show you the difference between those two files, which is line number 6. Like there's a line here essentially. Maybe I can do it this way. So we got a single line difference. This guy is new here. So here's another one. If you do something like diff-u and you pass in the two files, this gives you a unified kind of view of that. So kind of the whole thing is in one shot, essentially. It's a unified version of the difference. And another one is diff-c, which gives you like context difference. So like that. Now, let's say we want to save the changes in a separate file, and then we want to use patch to kind of combine things. We can do something like diff-u, file 1 and file 2, and then we can send this to a, let's say, changes.diff file. And then by pressing enter here, notice that we have this new file here, which contains like the difference. Now, if we run something like patch, which is our second or the last CLI tool here, and we do something like file1.txt, and then we pass in the changes, this will essentially kind of combine the things. Like, see here, it added the changed thing, the difference between the two files added to the first file. So if you want to reverse that, you can pass in -r, capital R here, and that would remove it. This is pretty cool. So if you have two files with like some difference, you can essentially create those changes and put them in a separate file, and then apply those changes using patch to the file you want to kind of update. So you can do something again like this. It will add the file or add the changes and then -r to remove it. All right, that's all for this video. Remember, you can always do something like man and then pass in whatever command you want here, and that will give you all the manual and all the documentation you want for whatever tool you're using. All these tools are kind of pre-installed, so you can just find everything here. Yeah, I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope you learned something new. Remember, some of these tools, you're probably not going to use them every day, but whenever you want to use something like that, you hopefully now know what's available for you, and you can just use these things. One last thing, as I said, all these tools, or at least the majority of them, can be piped into each other. Once you know how each one works, you can just combine them and you can do some crazy things with them. So yeah, I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you in the next one.